I want to open the show today by bringing you some of the most tense moments journalists have experienced on the ground in Ukraine.
Go. Well, it just shows how quickly things can change here. We were outside filming.
Ukrainians who resist. Oh, I tell you what, I just heard a big bang right here behind me. I thought we shouldn't have done the live shot here. There are big explosions taking place in Kiev right now. Oh,
there's another one.
I've got a flak jacket right here. Let me just get it on.
We are hearing explosions in the capital of Kiev right now. This is that coordinated attack that for weeks Western intelligence analysts warned could take place.
Focus. Should we run that way?
Right. We've got to be mindful of the driver as well, OK?
The Antonov Airport, which is about 25 kilometres, 15 miles or so out of the centre. These troops you can see over here. Stand up, Lewis. These troops you can see over here, they are Russian airborne forces. They have taken this airport. They've allowed us to come in and be with them as they defend the perimeter.
Those streaks that you're seeing up there in the sky, I don't know how we can see right now, you can see more artillery rockets apparently be firing from Russian territory towards the territory, I would say around Kharkiv. I don't know if you can hear this right now.
The situation is worsening by the hour, with Russian forces taking over strategic airstrips to enable them to bring in countless soldiers and artillery as Vladimir Putin tightens his grip on Ukraine. It is incredibly dangerous, and no matter of your opinion of the journalists from differing networks, those there on the ground in Ukraine right now have my respect and gratitude for bringing us information as this situation unfolds. And outside of the military action, there has also been an emotive plea from Ukraine to the rest of the world at a meeting of the UN Security Council.
It's your duties as a chair. Call Putin, call Lavrov to stop aggression. And I welcome the decision of some members of this council to meet as soon as possible to consider the necessary decision that would condemn the aggression that you launch on my people. There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, Ambassador.
Powerful words from a man watching his independent country invaded by a crazed dictator. And to make matters worse, the United Nations has put Russia at the head of the UN Security Council this month. What an absurd disgrace that countries such as Russia can play the lead role in international security discussions while nations like China are involved in human rights committees. And as British academic Andrew MacLeod writes in The Conversation today, while any reasonable person would agree Russia should lose its seat on the Security Council, it is impossible. The desperate pleas of the Ukrainian ambassador were more meant for us, for the people watching around the world, because for Russia to lose its permanent seat, Professor MacLeod notes that it would require a vote from the UN General Assembly. And even if the numbers could be achieved, Russia possesses a veto power. This murderous regime will hold a seat on the Security Council forever. The UN is broken, and in the aftermath of this war, a serious discussion of reform is needed. But right now, what is the world doing?
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time. We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies.
Well, I'm sorry, President Joe Biden, but why on earth has it taken you so long to implement these more extreme sanctions? For a man who campaigned nearly entirely on the false narrative that Donald Trump stole the 2016 election with a partnership with Vladimir Putin, why did you not command the full fury of your economic sanctions earlier? The US media may be in your pocket and it may conveniently have forgotten, but in 2019, Biden promised that if he was elected to be the leader of the free world, Vladimir Putin would stop all hostilities.
because Putin knows if I am president of the United States, his days of tyranny and trying to intimidate the United States and those in Eastern Europe are over. I'm going to stand up to him. He's a bully, just like the president. And I know he doesn't want me to be president, but to tell you what, when I'm president, things are going to change.
Well, that's a clear election promise broken, isn't it? Let's hope that these belated sanctions have at least some impact. Well, let's bring in the panel. I'm joined by Adoni Media's Lisa Goddard and host of the Kenny Report, Chris Kenny. Chris, let's start with you. What did you make of Joe Biden's announcement of the sanctions? And do you think that the media is going to hold him to the standard that he needs to be held to?
Well, no, there's a protection racket going on in the media for Joe Biden. There has been for years, of course. So they wanted to get him into the presidency. I mean, look at the Australian media. For crying out loud, they run a 3-part series back during the Trump presidency called The Story of the Century, talking about how Vladimir Putin controlled the White House. It was completely fanciful, a ridiculous conspiracy theory. Obviously, what they should have been focusing on is the sort of building of empire, the horrible old-fashioned Russian nationalist regime that Vladimir Putin was building up and his expansionist tendencies. That was the real issue for the world, but instead they were focused on these sort of fantasies to try and do in Trump. I think that Biden is enfeebled. I don't think the media like to point that out often enough, and I think the two people who realise this more than any others are Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. I mean, they've been emboldened by the US weakness in policy terms, in that it's withdrawing from the world, but weakness in the White House because Biden's just not up to the job.
And how late it was as well, because, you know, the forces were there on the border for a very long time. There was no reason to wait. And Lisa, I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts on all of this, particularly because you are a journalist who has spent time in war zones. You've got an incredible career, and I know you were in Afghanistan when the Taliban actually fired rockets towards you and your crew. What would the situation be like in Ukraine now for those journalists who are putting themselves in danger?
Well, Jack, you're absolutely right in your editorial when you said we have nothing but respect for the journalists who are putting themselves out there, you know, as close to the front line as they can get, because you really are, you know, in this world of you just don't know what's going to happen next. And we saw that with the vision that was coming out yesterday, as the journalists were there actually putting on their flak jackets as the air raids were occurring. So it's a very fast-moving situation. And while we absolutely, you know, it breaks your heart when you look at the videos that are coming out now of, you know, families saying goodbye to their sons and fathers who are heading out to fight this war. But when you're on the ground, you are in just as uncertain times. You don't know what's coming next. And look, in this world of fake news, and where we do hold the media to account because they don't focus on what they should be a lot of the time. And as Chris said, you know, the American media weren't sort of pushing the president hard enough on Russia. And here in Australia, we certainly aren't putting enough pressure, I don't think, when it comes to what's actually occurring from the threat from China. But that's a conversation for another day. But, you know, we really have to respect the journos who are out there and giving us those stories, because without that, we really don't have a view into what is happening on the ground. And I guess the other advantage at the point we're in now is you can look to social media to get an insight, because Joe Citizen is as much a journalist as the qualified journalists who are there reporting for the big networks.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And Chris, I also want to ask you about Joe Biden's track record. We have seen him handle an international catastrophe in the form of Afghanistan. So Vladimir would have been watching, Xi Jinping would have been watching, the world was watching how he completely botched that exit. Were we tough enough on him as a media for him to learn lessons from that? And do you think he would have taken anything from that?
Well, I think there's no doubt that the media have been soft on him about that performance and about other performances, but you can't divorce that from the reality of the United States taking a more isolationist stand after Iraq and what's gone on in Afghanistan. They've decided that they don't want troops to keep the peace in those places, to consolidate their gains. There's just no public appetite for it. So they've retreated back to the US. And so Putin was able to make the obvious calculation that there'll be no military consequences for taking over Ukraine. In fact, Joe Biden's basically told him that a month ago. There won't be any military consequences. So, of course, he's essentially just reclaiming what he sees as part of of Russia, reclaiming a western frontier for Russia. It's disgraceful, but it's so predictable because he knew there would be no military consequence.
Yes, and Russia spent a long time insulating its economy, so the sanctions wouldn't be as impactful as if they were, say, to Australia. It's been preparing for this for a very long time.